Well, it was 20 years ago today that Mr. Ross Adventure went away. This video is 20 years in the making and something I've been planning for 5 years. Does that make sense? No. Stick around, hopefully it all will. Alright, so let's get down to it. This time, 20 years ago, I just landed in the USA on my first overseas trip, and I was overseas for 6 months. I had a job over in the USA working at a ski resort at Heavenly in Lake Tahoe, which is just incredible. The views, the mountain itself, the snow. It was an all-round amazing experience. I've talked about it a little bit in the past. It was an experience that really changed me. I came back from 6 months overseas a different person. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. So stay tuned. This is going to be somewhat long. It might be a little bit boring for some people, but I'm doing it for me, this video. This is something I've been wanting to do for 5 years since I started my channel, and I just haven't done it. So now I'm going to do it. So it all started when I was doing a short tourism course, and one of the guys there, he was already enrolled to go and work in the United States. And being a student for 6 months, we were eligible to go on this program called Work Experience USA. Now, I'd already been working for a number of years, about 9 years at the time, and I went back to TAFE to do this short course, and that was enough to make me eligible, which was pretty cool. So the first thing we did after arriving, after a long flight to LA, was go to one of the dodgier places in LA, Inglewood. It's not a very nice neighbourhood, but it's close to the airport, and we were meeting up with everyone else from the program the next day, so we needed to be fairly close to the airport. We got into LA in the afternoon, and we were meeting up with them the next morning, so it made sense just to stay somewhere close by. Funny story is, from that, we'd gone to sleep, woke up, looked at one of our watches, or the clock in the room maybe, I can't remember, and it said it was like 6 a.m. or something. Oh, time to get up. We both got up, had showers, and packed our bags and started getting ready, and then thought, geez, the sun's not coming up. What's going on? It seems pretty quiet out in the street. So I go down to the lobby, and down the lobby it was like 1 a.m. or something like that. So I don't know what happened there. But yeah, we just went back to bed after we'd showered and everything, and got up again the next morning and went back to the airport, met everyone, went to another hotel, we went to Disneyland, which was pretty cool. Then we caught a Greyhound bus from downtown LA, which was the seediest place I've ever been to, I think. One of those, you know, Hollywood movie scenes where you see all the homeless people standing around drums full of fires at night time and stuff. So we had to catch the bus at 11:55 p.m. from downtown LA, and the people that dropped us off down there, they didn't want anything to do with it. They drove through with the car doors locked and then just dumped us out. Didn't even hop out of the car themselves and said, no, you get your stuff out, we don't want to know. It all went well. We didn't get mugged, didn't get murdered obviously, because I'm still here now. So we caught this Greyhound bus up to Sacramento, then got another Greyhound bus out to Lake Tahoe, where I spotted the snow for the first time, and all of a sudden, after not sleeping the whole night, I was just energised. We had to go and meet up with all the people to give us introduction to the resort and where we were going to be living and all that, which was employee housing. So we get up there, find our bedrooms, and just chill out until everyone else come home. And well, the thing about employee housing was, this went on for the whole season, it was someone's Friday night every single night. So there were parties every night. And if there weren't parties in the housing itself, we were down the pub, the Fox and Hound, which is our local drinking hole. That wasn't far, just a quick stagger down through the icy, snowy streets. We had quite some entertaining times getting up and down that. But yeah, our first night there, we were into this big party, and so after not sleeping the whole night on the Greyhound bus, and then spending the whole day awake, almost 48 hours I'd been up by the time I went to bed, and I went into our apartment, had a look in the mirror, saw my eyes and went, nah, I'm not going back to the party, that's it, I'm going to bed. So we had numerous parties while we were staying there. We hosted some ourselves. It was just a constant cycle of working in the snow, partying at night, going to work the next morning with a hangover. It wasn't a party every night, but looking back in my memory, it seems like it was. So we did that for a few months. I used to work at this lift at the bottom of a canyon, which was the extreme skiing area, and that was pretty cool down there. You had views looking over the desert floor below. So the beauty of Heavenly Resort is you've got a California side and a Nevada side. Now I worked on the Nevada side, which looked over the desert. On the California side, you're looking over the lake. So some of the lifts on both sides, you could see both the desert and the lake in the same photo. But no matter where you went, the whole place was just incredible. So after 4 months of living and working there in the ski resort, a few of us decided to go road tripping across the United States, because a couple of us had round the world airline tickets. So we'd already had our tickets flying out of New York, and then that was to Europe, and then from Europe we went back through Asia on the way back to Australia. So we went around the whole globe in one direction. So the plan was then to road trip across the United States. The first car we rented was a van, because I had to drop a heap of our ski gear and everything we'd boxed up. So we were sending that back via FedEx to Australia, so I had to drive that to the FedEx depot, and we just used that same car to drive down to San Francisco. So we spent a couple of days in San Francisco tooling about, seeing Alcatraz and the cable cars and all the other famous San Francisco sites like Lombard Street, the windiest street in the world apparently. And Alcatraz was awesome. I loved that after seeing it in so many movies, so much history there. And that was the last place I took a photo with my good camera. I had an SLR camera. This was back in the days of film, and it went missing. So luckily, after losing my camera, one of the girls that was travelling with us, she had a nice camera as well, so I was able to get some duplicate photos from her. I was also able to use her camera to take my own photos from time to time. But once she was gone, I was onto this cheap camera which I'd found. It was just a point and shoot camera. So I guess looking back in some way, it was sort of karma that I'd found this cheap camera and kept it instead of handing it in, and then someone took my expensive camera at the rental car company. It was left behind by mistake, but when we went back there, it was gone. Someone had taken it. Karma coming back to bite me, and the rest of the photos throughout the rest of the trip were pretty shitty, but I'll whack some of them up a bit later in the video. After San Francisco, we went up to Yosemite National Park, and oh my god, Yosemite Valley is just amazing. One of my favourite places in the world. From there we went on to the Sequoia National Park, where they've got the giant redwoods, the sequoia trees. They are just huge. Absolutely humongous. The biggest trees I've ever seen. The biggest trees in the world. We're still up in the snow there in the Sierra Nevada mountains at the Sequoia National Park, but then we headed down through Death Valley and into Nevada to Las Vegas. Death Valley was pretty stunning. Vegas was okay. Had a bit of fun there. From there we went out through Hoover Dam, Colorado River, to the Grand Canyon, which, oh man, I love the Grand Canyon. That is an amazing place. I've been back there since. Also been back to Lake Tahoe and Yosemite and a few other places, 2012, but I won't share any of those photos. I'll have to edit the videos from that at one stage. From the Grand Canyon we went up into Utah. In Utah we saw some ghost towns. We stayed at a little town called Hurricane. We were staying at backpackers hostels a lot of the way, which was really cheap, but you also get to meet a lot of travellers and some very interesting people. If I was to travel on my own again, I would probably do the backpacker thing for sure. We went through Zion National Park just quickly. We didn't go through the whole thing or spend much time there because we had a deadline. We had to be in Denver to drop off the car in Colorado. So we spent 3 days in Denver. We dropped off the car first, and then we just caught public transport around Denver. Saw a bit of stuff around there. Went to the Coors Beer Brewery. Did a bit of a tour through there. So after 2 weeks together in the car, people were getting a bit sick of each other. We sort of split up a little bit in Denver. We're never together as a foursome again. After Denver, there was 2 or 3, and it swapped and changed. One bloke, I think he flew out to Minneapolis or something like that. And anyway, one of the other guys, we were trying to get a one-way rental car, and it was taking a bit of time. One guy got fed up with that. He's hopped on a Greyhound bus. So there was just 2 of us there trying to get a one-way rental. We eventually got it, and funnily enough, we saw the guy on the bus at a roadside stop in the middle of the night. I pulled up at the sign that says "Welcome to Nebraska," took a photo there, and the bus actually went past with my mate in it, and he saw me. And the original plan was to meet in Omaha, Nebraska, so we met up there, picked him up, and we spent the day just tooling around Omaha, went to the zoo. Then I think we still went separate ways. The 2 of us went up to Milwaukee, Wisconsin. We went through Chicago, didn't really see any of that, which I'm should have. Well, we were trying to pick up another rental car from Milwaukee, but we just couldn't make it happen. So we caught a Greyhound bus to Detroit, and from Detroit we met up with Paul again, and the girl that was travelling with us, Kim, she went into Canada. She was working further in Canada, so she went off and did her thing in Canada, and we also went into Canada, but we went a different way. She went back to Banff, and we went with another rental car, one-way rental, into Niagara Falls, which, oh man, we were drunk the whole time. Paul and I got along pretty well, and we were sort of hindered, I guess, by the other two in the travels. Paul and I were similarly aligned with our sense of adventure, so I think it was somewhat of a relief getting rid of the others. But we picked up the other guy who I was initially travelling with again in New York State. So we picked him up after Niagara Falls and drove across Pennsylvania, New Jersey, into New York City. Driving in New York City was an interesting experience. When we were already late to drop off the rental car, I was trying to avoid paying an extra day, and I really can't remember if I had to or not, but I know I was definitely late. And I did most of the driving over there because I was the only one over 25. The others were all under 25, so their age excess for a rental car was just hideously expensive. So we put down me as the only person as being the driver, so I had to do all the driving. New York City, there were three of us, Glenn, Paul and myself in New York City. We did Statue of Liberty, Empire State Building. I saw the Twin Towers, they were still around then. Thought about going up, but went no. Empire State Building is more famous, so let's go up the top of that. I wasn't to know that only 3 years later the Twin Towers were about to become way more famous than the Empire State Building for all the wrong reasons. What else did we do? Central Park, yeah, Times Square. Just had a good look around New York, but only 3 days. It was nowhere near enough, but still, it was good. So there we parted ways with Paul. He flew back to LA and then back to Australia. Glenn and I continued on for another month or so, just going to the UK and then back through China. We were initially going to go through Paris as well. We're flying Air France, so we had to land in Paris, but due to a lack of time and money and stuff, we canned that idea, which I was sort of disappointed now looking back that I didn't see any of Paris, even though I was at the airport twice. But went on to London, went to stay with a friend I had from Brisbane, from Gold Coast. He was working over in London, so I met up with him at his work. We went and had a beer afterwards, and we went to his place where he was staying. We were going to be staying there for about 3 or 4 nights or so, maybe a week, I can't remember. And we only got like 2 nights in, and the alcoholic guy who owned the place, he just gave us this dodgy mattress in a spare bedroom full of painting products and bits of timber and building materials. Just a mattress on the floor. It was just horrible and dirty and grubby. It was cheap for London, but he was an idiot, and he ended up kicking us out. He'd come home and got the shits with some crumbs that had been left on the bench by Glenn, and he kicked us out, gave us the rest of our money back, and then we had to go into London itself and find a youth hostel. Because we'd used the hostels all the way throughout America and it was dirt cheap, we've just gone, yeah, we'll continue with that. But no, youth hostels in London, instead of like the equivalent of say 7 to 20 Australian dollars at the most in America, it was about $50 a night in London. So we went, no, we can't do this. Luckily, I had some contacts through my mum. A couple from London had been out maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 years, whatever, earlier, and they'd known my mum when they were backpacking around Australia, and they kept in contact. I had met them briefly, I think, when they were in Australia. They were awesome. They met us at the train station, and we stayed in their house for a week. They put us up, took us down on a day trip to Hastings, to the coast. We went to a little town called Battle, where the Battle of Hastings took place, which is just such an important piece of history in not only English history, but in Western history. Yeah, they were amazing. So we went out drinking with those guys, and they showed us around London, and it was just pretty cool. So while we were there, we took a rental car. I went and rented one of the cheapest ones I could rent, and which was a Vauxhall Cavalier, which in Australia is a Holden Chimera. It was a 1985 model. This was in 98, so it was already about 13 years old. It was a bit of a piece of crap. Broke down at one stage and I had to fix it, but that was pretty easy. I filed up the points. Yes, points in the distributor. Who remembers them? Cleaned them up, and it was right as rain after that. We went up through northern England, went to Hadrian's Wall, which was a pretty amazing spot. Lots of history there that was built by the Romans, 2,000 years ago to keep out the crazy Scots, the barbarians. It's just so amazing. I really like that part of the world. And then went over into Scotland, went through Edinburgh. Edinburgh was amazing. Went to Edinburgh Castle, did a few other tours through Edinburgh's underground, and I really, really liked the city. Could have spent a long time there, but we're only there for a few days. Inverness we went to after that, spent a few nights in Inverness, went to Loch Ness, and that was pretty cool. Urquhart Castle, we went and visited that. Followed the length of Loch Ness around to Glencoe and back down the west side of Scotland through Glasgow into England again. We went to Liverpool. We stayed most of the day in Liverpool and did a Beatles tour, going through all the famous spots of the Beatles, where they used to live and grew up and stuff like that. So that was pretty interesting. I like that. I've always been a bit of a Beatles fan growing up. And then we ended up in Wales for the night. Just to tick that off the list, we spent a night in Wales. Didn't really see too much there. Well, we're back in England again. We went to a little spot you might have heard of called Stonehenge. Pretty important piece of, what do you call it, architecture? I don't know. It's a pretty amazing place anyway. It's just the energy there was pretty special. So much history and there's so much theory about it. No one really knows for sure, so there's so much mystery around it. It was just awesome to be there. Disappointing though, seeing how close it was to the freeway. They never show you that in the photos, but that's the reality of life these days. History blends with the modern world. What did we do then? We stayed in Windsor Castle, home of the Queen. Windsor was an awesome place. Sort of highlighted the difference between Glenn and myself by that stage in our travels. He wasn't really adventurous or anything like that. There were times in the States where we'd go down these little dirt roads beside creeks, because I was driving, and go, let's just check out what's down here. And the others would be, yeah, this is cool. And he'd be, let's stick to the main roads. We never know what's going to happen down here. We don't know where we're going to end up. Man, you're in a different country. You've got to experience it. Get off the main roads. So, similar sort of thing in Windsor. It sticks out in my mind. I wanted to go out and party and stuff, and he didn't want to do anything. We went for a walk around town. I just wanted to get out and explore and see the place, but I don't know, he might not have thought anything of it at the time, but it was one of those moments that stood in my memory as one of the defining moments that sort of separated us, I guess. From there we were back in London for a little bit, went back and stayed with those same friends again for a couple more nights before we flew out to Beijing, China. We landed there and we were mobbed by taxi drivers saying, come to this hotel, I'll take you. The adventurous side of me back then was just, okay, let's just come to this and just see what happens. But there was also that fear of being ripped off and not knowing where we were going. Sure, he did rip us off, but it was still a cheap fare, and he took us to a hotel which was adequate. It was cheap. There was a building site next to it which was fairly noisy, and for a shower it was just like a hose coming out of the wall. That was a bit dodgy, but it was comfortable enough. They had breakfast there, and they organised tours for us. So we went out and did a full day tour out to the Great Wall of China, which again was a bit disappointing because it was so commercialised. We went through all these other different places along the way, family members, restaurants and whatnot. But it was an amazing tour and just incredible to be at the Great Wall of China. How many people could say they've been to the Great Wall of China? So a couple of days in Beijing, went to Tiananmen Square and stuff. Funny story with Tiananmen Square, we had this map that the hotel gave us, and we went, alright, let's go to Tiananmen Square. That doesn't look too far on the map. So we start walking in the general direction, but you can't understand anything on the street signs, and none of it makes sense. So we just kept going, here, one more block, then all of a sudden, hang on, maybe this map's not to scale or whatever, or it doesn't have all the little side streets in it. It might be just major intersections. We don't even know where we are. Then we saw this photocopying place, which was a Kinko. I recognised it as being an American company. I thought, surely someone in there has to speak English, so we went in there. Sure enough, the guy in there was an American, and he wrote us all these cards out in both English and Chinese to give to taxi drivers with our hotel name, Tiananmen Square. He said, mate, long way from Tiananmen Square, you can't walk there from here. Oh, okay, fair enough. So we jumped in the cab, and then when we got the cab back to the hotel, we just showed the card to the driver. He took us there. It was just so simple. Tiananmen Square, we were mobbed by people wanting to practice their English, wanting to take photos with us, but that was pretty cool too. Tiananmen Square obviously being the place of the massacre, not so long before. That's all I sort of knew of Tiananmen Square. So being there, I was very mindful of that, and I don't know, I didn't really take in much else from it, the significance, but I've since learnt a lot more about the Forbidden Palace and everything there. So after that we flew out of Beijing, caught an internal flight down to Guangzhou, and we spent 4 nights there. The first 2 nights were in this hotel, and I think we're pretty exhausted and not really adventurous by that stage, because we didn't really do too much. We just sort of rested and watched the MotoGP in Chinese in that hotel. That was quite interesting. The most adventurous thing I think we did during those 2 days was go out and buy some Chinese food off the street vendors, which we hadn't done in Beijing. So we had no choice there but to go and buy food from the street vendors, and we didn't know what we're asking for. We just pointed at things. I was a meat eater back then. I don't know what I ate, so I just went with it. A couple of days after that, we met up with some Aussies that Glenn that I was travelling with, he knew them. We stayed at their place for a couple of nights, and they showed us around some of the local areas and took us to the markets where they do their shopping and showed us how they live in China. So that was pretty cool. From there it was a train journey down to Hong Kong, and that was our last day in China, our last day overseas. We spent the day just tooling around in Hong Kong, did some shopping, and just caught a boat cruise across the harbour. Didn't really see much of it. I'd love to go back and check it out a little bit more, because I know that there is a lot more to see in Hong Kong. China in general, I'd love to go and see a lot more of it. From there it was back to Australia. Landed in Cairns, and quick stop over there. We were back to Brisbane Airport a couple of hours later, and Glenn's family drove my car. They'd been storing my car the whole time. They drove it up to the airport for me, picked Glenn up, and they gave me my car. And after being backpacking around the world for months, and the only time I'd driven was in America and in England. A few short little trips here and there. For most of the time in America I never had a vehicle, and then when I became 25 I rented this car and went for a drive around up to Reno and around Lake Tahoe. Yeah, but getting back in Australia and being back in my own car and driving in Australia again was just bizarre. So I drove back to the house I was living in, where my girlfriend had moved out, and there was a strange bloke living in there with all my stuff, and his stuff was there as well. I proceeded to find someone else to rent the place, and then moved back down to Victoria. While we're overseas, Glenn's girlfriend had moved to Victoria, so he moved to Victoria as soon as we got back to Australia, and I pretty much did the same thing because I'd split up with my girlfriend and there was nothing keeping me in Queensland, so I moved back down to Victoria to be with my family, friends, everyone I knew, and all our stuff was shipped there from the snow. So I drove back down to Victoria and then picked up all my snowboard and all the rest of the gear that I'd shipped all those months ago from Lake Tahoe. So it was interesting to see them months and months later, after I'd been backpacking all around the world, living out of a backpack, to be reunited with all those things that I'd bought in America, or all my clothes and stuff. That was pretty cool, and yeah, that brings to an end my tale pretty much. There's a lot that I have forgotten that I probably should have included, but oh man, you get the drift. It was a life-changing journey, not only just working in a different country, meeting different people from around the world. There was also the aspect of driving, doing a road trip from one side of the United States across to the other, going into Canada, and then of course going over to the UK, and then going through China on the way home. There was just so many different elements to the trip, all packed into 6 months. It was incredible. Life-changing for me, and something I highly recommend doing if you ever get the chance. I hope you enjoyed this video. It's been good for me to finally go through all my photos again and get them digitised, and yeah, share them with you guys, talk about it. Something I've been planning for the last 5 years, so good to finally do that. Anyway, I will catch you some other time.